let's talk about international and bicultural relationships. Yes, I am in one. Yes, I work with couples from around the world who are in them as well. But I think there's an interesting nuance that we haven't really dived into on this podcast that I'd really like to do. So today I have brought Dr. Robyn McKay to talk with us about what happens when we're in an international relationship. Now, Dr. McKay holds a PhD in counseling psychology and serves as a strategic counselor to high-performing women in tech, healthcare, law, finance, and entertainment. The women she works with are smart, accomplished, and often quietly renegotiating identity, ambition, and belonging, even when everything looks polished on the outside. Her life hasn't stayed in one cultural lane, and as you'll learn from this interview, she's not only been in multiple bicultural relationships, but she's lived abroad and experienced what it's like to try to find your identity when you're away from home. Now, Dr. McKay has been for nearly 10 years with her partner from the USA, and she talks about they're from different areas of the state, so culturally how that difference has been as well. Both her work and her life revolve around one question. Who are you in relationship when culture, ambition, history, and love are all sharing the same space? I know you're going to enjoy this interview, so go grab a warm drink and let's dive in. Welcome to Relationship Reset, a podcast for high-achieving couples who've been together for over a decade and don't want to feel like roommates anymore. I'm Katie Russler, relationship strategist and couples counselor with almost 20 years of experience helping ambitious couples reconnect, strengthen communication, and turn their relationship into the best part of their success story. This podcast is about using practical tools and a lot of real talk to help you understand your patterns, stop feeling stuck and discouraged, and start working on your relationship in ways that actually fit your busy life. Because your relationship shouldn't be the cost of your success, it should be the best part of it. So let's dive in. Welcome back to the podcast. You guys know from time to time, I like to bring on expert speakers, but this is a special expert because she's not coming in just as a professional in the field of psychology and beyond. She's also coming as someone who has a very deep personal experience around the topic of living abroad and being in bicultural relationships, which are big topics for this podcast. So Robyn McKay, thank you so much for being here today. And I am really excited to dive into our conversation.
I am too. First of all, I love the work that you do. And this, as I was saying before we hit record, this is such a different conversation than what I've been having lately. So I'm just really excited to see what comes through and give my perspective and tell some stories because I got some good stories going on.
Oh my gosh, yes. So first share with us what you do professionally, and then we're going to dive into the personal because that's really at the heart of today's episode as well.
Beautiful. Well, I have a PhD in counseling psychology. And early in my career, I worked as a university psychologist, focusing on primarily gifted and talented girls and boys as they were growing up. I co-wrote a book called Smart Girls in the 21st Century with my mentor from grad school, Barb Kerr, who was also my role model for some of these bicultural relationships that I was in. And I will get into that in a minute. About 10 years ago, I stepped away from the university and had this deep-seated desire to create an international coaching practice for women leaders in tech, biotech, healthcare, and beyond. And so that's what I've been doing since about 2013, 2014 is all of this work with grown-up smart girls that I was doing with college level and, high school and elementary school kids as well during my early career. So I work right now at the intersection of psychology, energetics, and spirituality. Those are my three major focuses in the business. And each of those honors a part of who I am. I grew up Catholic and love my Catholic prayers and also love the gifts that my spirituality has given me in terms of healing, in terms of being able to just speak truth into the lives of the people who I care about. And energetics, I've been doing energy work my whole life as well. And I've been intuitive and psychic my whole life. And then psychology, of course. Well, I was a scientist from the time I was 10 years old with my first microscope. And early on in my career, I worked in biotech in a biosafety level 3 laboratory, doing a lot of bench work and things like that. But eventually I found my way to psychology, which is a social science. And so the psychological piece of understanding neurodiverse people's brains, how we think, feel, what our motivations are, what our psyches are. And so that's the intersection that I work at right now.
I love that you mix both sides of the brain in your work and beyond, right? It's just really a holistic viewpoint. You've teased us a little that one of your mentors was really the guide to bicultural.
The inspiration, right?
Yeah, the inspiration to bicultural relationships. Let's dive into that because you've lived abroad. You've lived multiple places. Walk us through where you've lived, and then we're going to dive into the relationship pieces and what you learned in those.
Living abroad, I think, is very generous. Although I have spent quite a bit of time abroad, I spent a lot of time in France, in Paris particularly, and in the south of France, where I was involved with a French economist for several months, which was one story. I spent some time in the UK as well on a shorter term basis. And then the major relationship that I had biculturally was with a man who was American, bicultural, grew up in Chile. Spanish was his first language, moved to the US for college. His dad was a diplomat early in actually, when Pinochet was like in the CIA and everything was going, that was all going on down in Chile. That was when he was actually born and his dad was involved with some of that stuff. So that was my major, like, I would say, longer term relationship that really helped me understand what we'll dive in more deeply to. So in terms of living abroad, I remember I said, like, I walked away from my job as a university psychologist to start my international coaching practice. And the first place I went was back to Missouri, where I had done my postdoc. And it turns out you can't launch an international coaching practice in flyover zone in America.
Okay. Well, now we know.
I packed my bags. And of course, as one does, I went to Paris and I launched my business from a 4th-story walk up in the Marais.
Wow.
With shitty Wi-Fi and smelled like patchouli, but there I was. That's where I launched Sheology. I still have some of those photo shoot pictures, that were going all the rage back then in front of the Eiffel Tower and everything. Well, that was legitimately like where I was in my life. And it was a very special time for me, also very stressful. So that I want you to just kind of position me there. And the other thing I will say is I grew up in Western South Dakota in the Black Hills in the 80s. So contextually, I grew up in a place where there were ranchers and farmers. I was not. My mom and dad were both educators, and then my dad went into real estate. But I always had this, first of all, I was like, well, how did I end up here? Like, I don't get it. I need to be like an English girl or something. This doesn't compute. So I always had this like need to travel internationally. That was something that was kind of innate in me. And it's actually built into my personality. I can see that on the Neo personality profile that I give to people. So I always had that drive. And so when there would be an international kid come in for a semester or, AFS or whatever it was, first of all, 100% fascinated. We actually had an AFS student live with us from Belgium when I was in high school. She's my Belgian sister still to this day. And she, like, that proximity to other cultures was just so important to me and to my family as well. That, like, when you look at a kid from South Dakota, a rural area in the 80s, being fascinated by these other places, just like you can see that that's built into my system. So to no great surprise, when I got old enough and I had my own money, that's the first place I went. It's to Europe.
Let's take a quick break.
Hi, friend. If you have been on the wellness journey for a while now, but you're tired of the highlight reel BS that you see on social media all the time, if you are tired of the wellness industry, if you are tired of what that word has become, I invite you to join me over at the podcast Led to Gold. All we focus on is the true stories and the realistic versions of wellness. And I think in a world that just wants the highlight reel, Led to Gold gives us a space where we can get actually real together. Join me wherever you get your podcasts, and I'll see you soon.
Let's speak a bit to why there are some of us who are drawn to relationships with those who have the accent or who have lived a different life than us.
Yeah. All right. Let's go to personality. The Neo 5-factor personality assessment that is the gold standard among psychologists and counselors. You'll be familiar with that, I'm sure. and it's norm-based and standardized. And one of the things that we see for, especially for women that I work with, probably that you work with, a lot of people who are drawn abroad, who are drawn to, learning new languages and trying new things, have a profile of a creative personality. So it means that they have a very, very high openness score. Openness to experiences is considered by psychologists to be the hallmark of the creative personality. We see embedded in that aspect of personality is this one facet that it's called actions, but I like to call it the wanderlust facet. Mm-hmm. It's where you like to go new places, try new things, have new adventures. We also have a very high sense of aesthetic. We love beauty. And beauty is actually a requirement for our lives. It's not something that is kind of a throwaway thing that we could take or leave, but it's actually required. And so between the wanderlust facet and the beauty facet and the abject curiosity, the love of learning, the curiosity about other people, those are all embedded in our personalities. I mean, if you were to take the Neo, I'm guessing we would see that in you as well. And so, and also there's another facet in that openness factor that's called values. And what values actually means, people who score high on values challenge the status quo, religious, political, societal values. Why are we doing things the way that we're doing them? And so people who score high on values are also going to be way more accommodating of other people's experiences than those who will score lower on values, who have a more conservative perspective on religious, societal, and cultural norms. So when we stack those facets and we look at this high openness, this highly imaginative personality. Probably you and I sure you're a reader too. So, going new places in our imaginations as well from the time we're little kids, just as a natural, the being drawn to other cultures, people from other cultures, whether it's to be romantically involved in them or just friends with them or just to be of service to them, is embedded in that aspect of the personality. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I'm like, yes, check, 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 double check. Yes. I think there is this, and I've noticed this with the people that I've worked with and then been friends with, some come over to a country and do an internship and they stay with those who speak their same language and who are like them and they don't want to explore. And then you have people like my husband and I who are like, let's go meet all the people. Let's get to know this culture and better understand it. And I think those people gravitate towards each other. But here is a piece I'd love to dive in as you share about the relationships. Usually one of the partners is a little less open than the other, which leads to we should live in my home country, or it just makes sense for us to be here, right? That sort of discussion happens. And over time, there is we do things my way because we're here. This is how we do it in this country, right? And that bicultural relationship starts to have this friction. In your dating and long-term relationships, did you experience that where it kind of hit that point where it was like, well, we're here, so this is how we do it. This is how it should be.
100%. When we look at personality, we also have to look at levels of agreeableness as well. So I'm a pretty agreeable person. I'm very curious, open-minded, open-hearted, and really just have this, I never approach any relationship from being a scientist, but just a curiosity about how other people live. So as a result of that, I was the one, especially with, we'll just call him the French economist. He was also Jewish. And, growing up Catholic, it just is very different, culturally and all of the things. And so, and very, very rigid, actually. His whole house, Katie, white. I'm messy. I am messy. I have ADHD. I spill things. And that, it became very much he was very embedded there. He had, if I were to diagnose him, I'd say probably had OCD. He was single in his 40s. He never thought he would get married. And then suddenly Robyn shows up and this is amazing. And it was, and there was an intensity to the relationship and it was exciting and it was interesting. And it hit all those marks for me as a neurodiverse, highly open person. Yeah. And that was actually Barb, my co-author on Smart Girls, tells a story about when she was in her probably 30s or something. She had an affair with a French scholar who she said they conducted their entire relationship in middle school English, right? So,
yep.
So Barb, my role model, I said every woman needs to have, some kind of French lover in their history just to pull out for parlor tricks or something.
Right.
On a more serious note, yes. the degree to which the expectation was that we do things my way here because this is what I've always done. And then it's compounded by somebody who was very rigid, controlling, and had quite a temper, were enough for me to, put the brakes on that pretty quickly and say, even though you have not asked me to marry you, I cannot marry you.
Right.
He wanted me to convert to Judaism, which would stand to reason. He claimed to not be particularly conservative in his beliefs, but from the outside looking in and from my experience, it was definitely the case. And I started feeling very contained and very much like I had to do certain, not controlled necessarily, but just very much like I was living in somebody else's life. My French is terrible, let me just say. And so that was another element to it. And it wasn't that I wasn't practicing. It's just is that my receptive language is way better than my spoken language. And so that was a barrier for me as well. Ultimately, it was something that I recognized pretty quickly wasn't going to work in the long term. And yet I learned a lot from that experience as well.
The point about agreeableness, I have never put it into those words, but you're exactly right. That one of you is probably more agreeable. And then there's a point, as everyone knows here on the podcast, women hit perimenopause and we're not as agreeable anymore.
Oh no, the masks come off.
Exactly.
Forget it.
We reevaluate the agreeableness and it turns the relationship on its head and for good reasons, right? As long as both partners are willing to do that work. But it is agreeableness. I think that is, when we look at accompanying spouses, the ones who will move with their partner for careers or whatever, it's over 70% that are women. And so when we look at that, I think, wow, that's a lot of people who would qualify in the agreeableness category.
Accommodating,
okay,
curious, and yes, and having a love of adventure as well, I think is really a qualifier or, a characteristic of those of us who do make those decisions to move. And yet, to your point with the perimenopause onset and just, the masks come off and sometimes the other partner is not willing to do the work either. And that can create a lot of discord in the family for sure.
Very true. Very true. Let's move us to the UK. So we've got French economists and now we're in the UK.
French economist. And I always had this dream that a British CEO, and I had that. He's actually a dear friend that I met on a project when I had a team with Barb and a couple of other psychologists, had gone to Northern Italy to do some leadership research at a school there that was associated with the University of Kansas, which is where I studied. And this man was somebody who was part of that team, and he was lovely. And we had a beautiful motorbike ride through the Italian countryside and ate good food and drank champagne and had that kind of romantic experience. And the thing about that was, listen, I know that one person can't represent a culture. I understand that. And the thing about, in contrast to the French economist, with the Englishman, what I will say is that I'm psychic. I'm reasonably telepathic, and I can kind of tune into what people are thinking or what they're feeling. He was like a freaking blank slate to me. I don't know what was going on behind the wall. I have no idea. He's lovely, and I so value and appreciate him for who he is. But for me, it was more about at that point in my life, it was not just about having adventures. I was truly ready to find my person and to get married. And when I look back at that person in particular, what I look at is I couldn't read him. It was like, I don't know if it was the stereotypical English stiff upper lip or what, but there was like nothing. Did you ever read Twilight, the vampire novel?
I never read it, but I have watched. I'm one of those who watches it in the background so that I feel like calm and safe. Like the music plays and I'm like, okay, yeah.
Yeah, it's Twilight. So Edward is the vampire. And one of the things he loved about Bella is that he couldn't hear her thoughts.
Yeah.
He could hear everyone else's thoughts except her. And for me, it was I'm not saying I'm a vampire, but I'm just relating to, I couldn't there's nothing, and I don't know, maybe he just didn't think. I don't know, but whatever. We were not on the same bandwidth. He was handsome, he was charming, and it was also just very clear that this was not going to be a long-term solution to my desire to find my life partner. So bless him, bless the time that we spent together. I'll always have the motorbike ride through, northern Italy and Verona and all the things. And then we just said farewell. And we're still friends on Facebook, but he's very happily married and has kiddos. And I called him and congratulated him for making a baby. And so it's very lovely.
That's wonderful. So it sounds like a big piece for you with that cultural difference wasn't necessarily just about the culture, but also the attunement to each other, the fact that there was just not that connection.
Right. And I think too that when I look at personality, I have to also look at nervous system and how the nervous system is wired. We see in the personality profile, neuroticism is the factor that's most associated with the nervous system. So anxiety, angry hostility, depression, sensitivity to stress, impulsivity, that kind of thing, social anxiety. Those are the kinds of things that we can see in the neuroticism feature or a factor in the profile. So when I compare him to the French economist's nervous system, red hot, stressed, anxious, pissed off. He was disagreeable. So he would, I remember him screaming in the backyard at the bank he was working with about getting paid or something. I'm like, oh my God, I don't know how to do this Frenchman anger. What is that? And in contrast, the Englishman was very his nervous system was so, I'll say flat, just very like a rock with his nervous system, just very steady Eddie, which is fine, but it didn't have that. It was not lit up with any kind of activity that was, I'll say, even compelling to me as somebody who picks up on that kind of thing. So we do have to look at that too. The nervous system is an important piece of understanding the attraction factor too.
Absolutely. And then if we go into the Chilean.
Oh, yeah.
And I was just thinking, you're just talking about kind of flatline, no passion. When I think of Chile, I think of passion. I think of color and flavor and so much. So let's go to that relationship.
Handsome, and he was very smart, and he was a musician, an artist, sexy, all the things. Yeah. He was studying psychology, and the way that we met was actually through Barb. He was a graduate student of hers in Arizona before she moved to Kansas, and then I became a graduate student of hers, and he was there was that connection. And he was very good at relationships. He was a counselor by training, and so had all of those kinds of markers of somebody who could connect and somebody who could be passionate and be truly present with another person. And that was very much a gift. In fact, I met him during graduate school, and I moved to Arizona for my job. I said, I'm not moving here without a job. And I got I still think at that time, it was the best early career psychologist position in the nation, if not the world. And I still stand by that because of all the things I was able to do in that position. So I got the position and I moved in with him. He said, oh, you just, live with me and it'll be fine. Well, that's when stuff went sideways because we had been doing long distance. He had grown up in Chile, went to an international school, came to college in the US, landed in Arizona, was doing graduate work in Arizona. He was doing his PhD work. And so he said, just move in with me. I've got a, condo here. It'll be fine. I move in and it was so not fine because we had been doing long distance. And what I didn't understand about that particular person, and obviously this is not to speak about the entire culture, but for that particular person, he smoked marijuana daily. I didn't know that because I wasn't living with him. When we were long distance, he drank way too much wine every single night. There was a whole thing with an addiction profile that really came forward for me. And it took me about 3 years to extract myself from that because I was also starting my career. We were in the middle of that, it was 2008. So there was that recession stuff going on. I took a pay cut when I started at ASU. They hired me for a salary and then they had to cut it back because of the recession stuff. So there was just all of these things that I was kind of stuck there, I think financially more than anything, and trying to make the best of it because I did care about him. We were connected. We had so much in common. And ultimately with him, I traveled to Chile with him. I was the first woman he ever brought back home. His mother was still living there. His father had died years before. I had a lovely time. We went for New Year's in Chile. So I spent New Year's upside down on under the equator.
Yep.
And it was such a romantic time, but it was also very, very difficult. I remember thinking, maybe with the alcohol and marijuana, maybe I'm not cool enough. Maybe this is a cultural thing and I'm just not understanding it. Maybe I'm making it a problem when it's not a problem, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And when what it actually was an addiction that I was trying to explain away with cultural differences, I'll say.
I've seen that with couples that I work with, that is one area. Some things they don't think about the cultural difference is why we communicate differently. The cultural difference is why we share emotions differently. They won't think about that, but they will think about, maybe it's the cultural difference in how much they drink or smoke. Okay, well, maybe I should be more understanding. That's where they'll bend their belief.
Like I was so flexible with that. Like I bent over backwards with that one.
Yeah, that's the area for those listening. Don't bend over backwards when it comes to addiction.
No.
Start to pay attention when it comes to communication and emotional intelligence, because that is where culture is a really big factor in it. So what would you say from these 3 relationships you really learned about yourself and about being in a bicultural relationship?
Yeah, I learned so much about myself because, and this plays out in my marriage too. I'm married to an American. From my intuition told me one time, you're going to marry an American stockbroker. And I'm like, really? Can he have an accent? Well, he does. He's from New York.
Nice.
But we'll get into that. And he came after these guys, right? Like that was on my way to meeting my husband. One of the things that I learned, and it actually has played out in my marriage too, is how flexible I actually am and how accommodating I am of other people's bad behaviors. And I have this in the past. Now, listen, perimenopause is a thing.
Yeah.
And my give a shit meter is like broken. So that's shifted for me in the past few years, but really just being accommodating and making assumptions about, well, this is just the way he is because of how he was raised, or this is just the way he is because of his culture. And I think it was exacerbated by my own training as a psychologist, as a multicultural practitioner as well. So there's all of these layers professionally that play into how I do my personal relationships. I suppose I can't help it, but it does bring a level of awareness about, I think I'm overly accommodating. And where am I in all of this? I always relate back to that. Remember that Julia Roberts movies from like the 90s, The Runaway Bride?
Yep.
Where she, gets engaged and runs away at the altar. And she finally figures out that she doesn't even know what kind of eggs she likes because she just orders whatever eggs her fiance is ordering. And it wasn't quite as dramatic for me, but there was a lot that I just not gave up on myself. I don't want to say it like that, but I just accommodated because I could. And because that's one of the things that we see with gifted and talented women is that we're too well adjusted for our own good. That's one of our big headlines in our book, Smart Girls. You're too well adjusted for your own good. That's one of the tells, is that when we're so overly accommodating that it's not, I know what I like, I know what my preferences are, and also I can accommodate other people's preferences and behaviors quite well, better than most. And I was in therapy I think it was after the Chilean or during, like, as that was ending, I said to my therapist, Neil, everybody's got to have a Neil or a Katie, I think. But I said to Neil, I said, maybe I just suck at relationships. And he said, well, maybe you're just way too good at relationships. And I think that might actually be the case. Does that make sense? Like, yes. that I can stay because I can stay.
Right. I mean, what you said, I'm flexible, I'm accommodating, I can adjust. I will factor in all of the things and be so gracious and so empathetic that I will stay, even at the cost of me.
Even at the cost. Yep.
Yeah. When you think about, like, people who are listening usually are in long-term bicultural relationships, and some of them are waking up to some of these challenges of going like, oh, I thought some of this would level out or we would get adjusted to it. Or, like I said before, they're not recognizing it is a cultural difference.
Right.
What thoughts or advice would you give them?
Well, I think, and I could even just think back to what advice would I give my younger self who was exploring. And I really look at those early relationships as exploration. Yeah. And trust me, I dated my fair share of, American boys and men as well, of course, that, like football and cherry pie and, whatever, who are boring. Oh my God, they're so boring, Katie. Okay. So that being said, I do think it's really important for women to have our own money so that we can be free to make decisions that are best for us, not because of financial need. In other words, I think it's really important for my past self, for my younger self, to understand that I want to be with somebody because I want to, not because I have to.
Yes.
And I know that that's not possible for everybody. I know that that's a tall order. And yet I think that there's something in that for all of us around my aunt. Can I swear?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, I know I can, but do I have permission to swear?
You have permission to. People always ask me for permission, and I'm like, of course. What?
No,
There's something
please,
about
feel
my
free.
energy that people.
Well, I mean, I just want to be respectful of your audience as well. But no, my aunt Anne is my dad's sister, and she was another inspiration to me besides Barb. She was one who was traveling internationally. She was married to an attorney. She was the first female. She was the Secretary of Labor in South Dakota, the first woman to do that in the 80s, and had her own career in politics and education. And she would travel internationally, and she'd bring me stuff home all the time, pencils and stationery from Harrods in London. And in fact, I just used some perfume that she had given me recently that she'd got in the Middle East somewhere. So there was always that inspiration as well that we see, across generations. But one of the things that she said to me when I was in my 20s, she said, listen, she said, you have to have fuck you money. You have to have fuck you money so that you can do what you need to do what you want to do. And I think that that's an important thing for those of us who are in any relationship, but probably even more importantly, if you're living abroad with somebody who is from a different culture, it is important to have your own money and to not overly rely on another person's income, financial streams for your well-being. Because for me, I always want to have the out. I always want to be able to take care of myself no matter what. I hope that doesn't sound selfish. I just think it's really important for women.
No, I think what you really are drawing light on exactly what you said. Be with someone because you want to be with them, not that you need to be with them. And many bicultural couples don't go into the relationship with more education on that may happen later on, that there'll be a financial and power imbalance, especially if you live in your partner's home country. And there needs to be a discussion for younger generations who are like, okay, starting to date and then get married, to have these discussions about how do we make sure you always feel secure. I see that on repeat as well, that there is this dynamic difference, and it causes tension in the relationship, and money will be used against the spouse as a way of control.
Yes, absolutely. And then the other thing besides money is learn the damn language.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's to me as well. I mean, so here's the thing about, we should have like 4 parts of this, I think, because there's just so much to talk about. But when I look at how I learned to speak English as my first language, the story of that is I was a late talker. I didn't speak until I was 2.5. And then when I did, I spoke in complete sentences. My grandmother tells me, I came out into the kitchen. She was babysitting me. I came out into the kitchen. I said, "What you doing, Grandma?" And she looked around. She said she had no idea who was speaking to her because I had never spoken a word before that at all. So it would stand to reason that when I'm in a country that I don't know the language, I know, French syntax and my vocabulary is okay and everything, but literally putting together words in some kind of, coherent sentence is really difficult for me still. And so given how I learned English when I was a child, it would stand to reason that probably my brain is going through a similar processing mechanism. But learning the language and being able to speak it and to speak for myself is very important. And I remember being in France for as long as I was, thinking they have no idea how smart I am. They have no idea, because I can't put 2 sentences together. I can't put 2 words together. The anxiety that I would have about getting it right, perfectionism, all of those things were just really impediments, probably also to the relationship I had with the Frenchman. And his English was proficient. So we did conduct most of our relationship in English, but I think that I was lacking, the capacity I know that I was lacking the capacity to express myself in French. And that also, I think it cuts off part of your spirit when you're not able to express yourself fully.
I had the same experience of living here in Germany and being like, people don't really know that, like, I know my stuff. I am really actually intelligent. And that was all in my head, my own things I was working through. But it was this year when I finally said, no more excuses. The pandemic hurt a lot of us who moved to a country prior to the pandemic and started learning the language, and then we're stuck inside and not practicing it, right? Not if you didn't work in it, you weren't practicing it. And then coming out of that was like, there's this whole new world and I don't know how to speak the language anymore. I said this year, no more. I'm really tired of the anxiety levels and not avoiding new situations, not wanting to have to deal with things. As my kids get older, I never use them as a translator, but I was definitely like, we're not going that.
Oh, for sure.
I started doing lessons again because I was like, I need to know this. And I realized it is a level of respect to my husband because we've always conducted our relationship in English. And he has even said to me, do you realize, like, I don't understand, or I can't always say everything that I can in my language because Germans have a lot of words. They have a lot of words.
A lot of words. A lot of good words.
Yeah, very detailed, focused. This specifically means this. And you're like, whoa, we don't even have a word in English. But he can't say those things because I don't know the language well enough yet. And I was like, no, it's time to switch that. So I love that you put that as number 2. Number 1, have your own money. And yes, I hear you. It's not about selfishness. This is about both partners feeling safe and secure and stable in the relationship and wanting to be there. And then to learn the language so it isn't a pressure point.
I think that it's also, the emotional part of that as well, that the best way, the thing that I learned from my Chilean partner was that he spoke English perfectly. He spoke with no accent and in Chile, he was hired to teach Chilean executives English. And he said at the time he had to pretend like he was America, like he was from America. And he says he was practicing with one of his executives, and the executive said something that was just bullshit. Mm-hmm. And my partner in Spanish called him on it. And the guy was like, wait a minute, only a Spanish speaking Chilean person would know this thing. So there, the jig was up. But, just the expression emotionally, I think, comes from the language of your heart. And when you're not able to do that in your relationships, I think that is that is a very difficult experience to have for both partners.
Such a driving reason to improve that for either partner who's having that struggle, definitely. Well, Robyn, to wrap us up, I always have homework for my listeners. If you had a piece of homework for a bicultural couple who's maybe going through some challenges right now and are starting to recognize, hey, whether it be power dynamic around money or language differences, or just this realization of like the relationship's kind of on its head, let's do things differently, what would be some conversations they could have this week?
Well, I always loved to learn, how do you say this? I read frequency. Like my first language is frequency, right? So an emotion. And so I want to be able to feel the frequency of, or what is an early childhood memory or something like that, to bring up just the energetic of the relationship, but also the energetic of the spirit of the person and the ancestry that they carry. They carry it in their bones and their nervous systems and their memories of, from where they came from. So I want to know that. And I want to share that as well. And then I think that, don't you love reflective listening practices?
Yes.
And then, the other part of that then is, what did you hear me say? How did you hear me say it? And just do that. That can be it's an intimate thing. And sometimes, especially, people who are in partnerships for a long time, I think that we lose that, we're too busy checking off, who walked the dog and who, whatever, to really sit and be with each other's energetics on, those sacred moments that we can actually create. The intimacy that we actually crave in our relationships comes from the frequency.
Your first one, ask them how do you say this in your language? Or what's your first memory? Just this last weekend, I was playing cards with friends, and my husband and I were, I played cards a lot growing up. And so I was shuffling real fast, and they were all like, whoa, Katie, what's going on? And I said, my dad and my grandfather and my uncle played poker. And so I learned early on, not because I was playing poker, but how to shuffle cards. They taught me. It was a fun party trick, right? Oh, look, she's young and she can shuffle cards. And my husband was like, I didn't know that about, he knew I could shuffle, but he didn't know that. And I was like, yeah, how often we don't ask curious questions anymore because we think we know everything, but we don't. Hey, when did you learn that skill? How did you get so good at that? Be curious again. And I love that. What's your first memory? I have fun asking questions like that, but I think that's the therapist to me. I'm like, tell me about the time.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. I can therapize my way through any conversation, of course. And, when you're not a therapist or your partner isn't one, then you've got to find a different way to do that. But I think, and going for walks and having those conversations shoulder to shoulder rather than face to face is another one. Especially, I think for men, it's easier to talk about those more tender moments when they're moving or when they're, driving or whatever. My husband, the native New Yorker, and I have really great conversations when we're driving. And we're also really good at car karaoke, by the way.
Oh, awesome.
So good.
Do you bring out your phone and use it as a microphone or something?
No, but I have been known. Our favorite one is the Love Shack B-52s.
Oh, yeah.
I have this awesome video of us. It was totally spontaneous. And his daughter is in the back of the car. We're on a road trip to California. His daughter is probably 16 at the time. You can barely...
Hiding. Like, oh my God, I hope nobody sees me.
Yes.
Oh, I'd love that. Then I'll remind everyone the second piece of homework was asking your partner, what did you hear me say? And I think this gets us out of autopilot too, and just stop assuming. That's a repeat challenge many couples, even bicultural couples, face, is we just assume what our partner means because in the past, this has kind of been what they meant. And it just makes our job easier because we're like, okay, I'm going to act like this is what you mean. But take a moment to say, especially if you see your partner triggered by something you say, hey, what is it you understood that I said? Or what did you hear me say? And be careful of your tone of voice because that'd be like, well, tell me what you heard me say. No, really curiosity. Exactly.
Connect. Yeah.
Because you want to make sure they didn't misunderstand a word. That has been a pattern for my husband and I. A word has been used maybe incorrectly or with in the wrong way. And I really was like, are you sure that you mean to use that word? Hold on, let's, or the same where his definition of a English word is different than my definition. And we've had to pause the argument and go what does that mean to you? Oh, well, that is not what I meant.
Exactly. I mean, there's so many things that it takes me all the way back to Karen, my Belgian sister, when we were in high school together. We were getting ready for lunch and she kept on asking me if I was angry. And I'm like, I'm not angry. What's going on? Well, she meant hungry. But, the French and the H's and that whole thing. So, it's just those simple things are just they can create such unnecessary confusion and dissonance when we're not simply being mindful of each other. I really think that, the bicultural relationships, really in the ones that I've experienced myself, whether it's friendships or romantic partnerships, have really been ones that have invited me into really, truly deeply understanding somebody else's perspective and not making assumptions. Because, when you're both American, we have, there's a shared language, there's shared experiences, culturally, societally, or, my husband and I are both Catholic. And so, we have those shared experiences. But when there's a language difference or a difference in countries, there's so many opportunities and invitations to just be present. And that can be hard. Being present is hard, but it's also so worth it. So worth it.
Absolutely. We're going to end on that. Be present in your relationship, please. It is easier not to, but really be intentional, especially in this phase. If you've been together for 10, 15, 20 years, be intentional and be present. It's worth it. It's absolutely worth it. Robyn, if people want to connect with you after this episode, how can they find you?
The best ways to find me, I'm over on Instagram, Robyn McKay, PhD. My first name spelled with a Y. That's probably the best place to connect with me. I'm also over on TikTok. I do the TikTok.
Nice.
Dr. Robyn McKay. I love it over there. I talk about psychology, energetics, and spirituality over there. But the last thing I will say is that I talked a lot about the NEO personality profile today, and it's such a good assessment for couples to be able to really understand, what are our personality differences? And it does take into account cultural differences. The cultural conversation is in there as well and can be, but to be able to look at personality differences and to look at them in a standardized way. So compared to other people, I have this much in my personality, this much agreeableness. And as it happens, you have this much disagreeableness in your personality. And so you can have whole conversations around just the personality differences. And then, of course, the culture is overlaid onto that. So that would be the other thing I would say is take the NEO.
Yes.
Take the NEO.
Yes. I will put links as well. Is there a link on your website?
The best way to get a hold of me is to book a call. So drrobynmckay.com/call. It's consult.
Perfect.
So,
excellent.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Robyn. And thank you for sharing about your personal relationships and really helping us to kind of see some of the nuances that take us back to the beginning of our relationships, past ones too, right? But also can help us navigate why we're where we are now. Because often we think, how did I get here? Well, we just trace it back. So I appreciate your time and all the wisdom you shared with us today.
Thanks for having me.
And dear listener, we'll see you next week. Before you go, I want to leave you with this. The effort you put into your relationship is one of the most important investments you'll ever make. How you communicate and grow together shapes your home, your leadership, and the example you set for the people around you. Relationship work is truly legacy work, and it quietly impacts more lives than we often realize. If this episode resonated, consider sharing it with someone you care about, a partner, a friend, or another couple who's building a full life and want their relationship to be the best part of it too. And if you're enjoying these conversations, make sure to follow or subscribe to Relationship Reset. Leaving a rating or review also helps this message reach more couples who are ready to grow with intention. I'll see you next week.